When you see someone struggling on the street and say, somebody should do something, that somebody is you. So belonging means you have more responsibility. It means you have more agency. It means this is your state. This is your country. Claim it. And some people say, you need to go back to your country. Come here. Come here. And there's some people out there today that don't understand that. They think that the country, the state, the world belongs to a few group of people, a small group. And sometimes they think, well, you have to be white and Christian and look like me in order to belong. Dr. Jay and I were talking last night about the history, the evolution of equality. And some of you may know this. Piketty just wrote a book called The History of Equality. He's an economist from France. I'm writing a piece on the history of equality. Why is that important? Well, first of all, it's new. Equality is new. In terms of operationalizing it, it's about 250 years old, which is nothing. Before that, virtually every society, almost every society, was organized around hierarchy, around the notion that some people belong, some people had dignity, some people were human, and other people was fodder. Other people was to be enslaved, other people was to be used, other people was to be disposed of. That was all around the world. There were kings and queens and royalty, and then there were just folks. And that didn't really start to change until France and the United States started changing it at a national level about 250 years ago. Think about that. Go back more than 250 years, almost every society is organized in terms of somebody matter, a few people, but most people don't matter. Most people don't matter. And so to suggest that everybody matters, even to suggest it, is actually a radical concept. And I said France and the United States were the first two countries to begin to organize around that. And you know what happened, of course, was that Thomas Jefferson was hanging out in France. And so he comes back from France and says, I got an idea. I'm gonna write the Declaration of Independence. And you know what I'm gonna say in there? They will hold certain truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal. Now he meant men. He didn't say all people. He said all men. And he meant men. But he didn't mean all. He meant all his friends. He meant the colonialists coming from England. He meant white men. So he said something that was potentially far-reaching, but not far enough. That's the Declaration of Independence, enshrined in our first founding document. And someone came along later who said, wait a minute, we got to extend this beyond white men. His name was Abraham Lincoln. In a short piece he wrote in Gettysburg Address. And in that address, he criticized the United States for not extending equality to more people. He's responsible for what's now called the 14th Amendment, which is the amendment that talks about equality before the law. So he actually reframed equality and made it more real. And then he's assassinated. And when he was assassinated, his vice president, President Johnson, who was a slaveholder and a segregationist, he said, no, not on my watch. We're going back to Jefferson's concept of equality. Black people are not going to have any freedom in the country that I'm president of. And In this country, we have been struggling with a couple of key concepts. One of them is the concept of extending the idea of equality to everyone as a God-given right. The idea of belonging and dignity to everyone. It's in our Constitution, it's in our Declaration of Independence. Almost every major legal problem is around that issue. And the other is who is the we? So you go to the Constitution, not the Declaration of Independence, the Constitution. And the Constitution starts off by saying, we, the people. We, the people. Now, like Jefferson's handwriting, you might think we, the people means we. But in case you're confused, Chief Justice Taney said in 1856, we did not and could not and never would mean black people. He said black people can never. This is the Chief Justice of the United States Supreme Court in a state called Dred Scott. He said black people could never be part of the we. Okay, so you may say, all right, this is interesting, but why are we talking about this today? Mitch McConnell, Donald Trump, Steve Bannon. If you go to Steve Bannon's website, which I'm recommending that you don't, but if you get lost on the internet and you find yourself on Steve Bannon's website, you're gonna find out he talks about belonging. He talks about belonging, but he makes it clear that in his rendition of belonging, it's about white people, it's about Christians, it's about Protestants. It's not about gays, it's not about blacks, it's not about Latinos, it's not about, he has a small we. So he's claiming, I said it. I would say get your mind out the gutter, but that's negative. The point is that when we say we have to mean everybody. So we talk about the circle of human concern where no one is outside the circle. That we acknowledge dignity, respect, and equality for everyone. Now in the midst of what we have dealing with today, that might seem like unrealistic. That might seem like just a dream. But unless we can dream, unless we can imagine, unless we can be creative, we don't have a future. So you have to dream. But we have to do more than dream. We then have to do the work to make the dream real. So we started something a few years ago called Government Alliance for Racial Equity. You can go online and Google it. Government Alliance for Racial Equity, called GARE. There was one group, first group in the United States to create a racial equity task force, came out of Seattle in 2005, Mayor Nichols. The first in the entire country. A few years later, there were two. One out of Seattle and one out of Portland. Whole country. Julie Nelson, who's a friend of mine, ran it for many years, for over 20 years. She did some work of pushing through family medical leave here in Washington. And somebody got pissed off. When a new mayor came in, some of his donors said, you owe us a favor, we gave you a bunch of money. He said, okay, I got it, it's politics, I got it. What do you want? Fire Julie Nelson. She put this thing in and gave workers all kinds of rights. We don't like that, fire her. The Seattle Times wrote an article saying, the mayor gets to choose, the new mayor always gets to choose who he wants to run his top level things, but this is wrong. This is just wrong. She's getting fired for standing up for families. We had a big acknowledgement and celebration of Julie's work. I came, I spoke, and there were hundreds of people, just like here. Everybody was sitting up and testifying what she had done for people over the last 20 years. And then I spoke. You know what I said, Dr. J? I said, this is wonderful, but now Julie doesn't have a job. She has a house note and not a job. She's aging like many of us, and she doesn't have health insurance. She has kids and she can't take them to college. So it's great that we're celebrating her. But how are we supporting her? How are we standing with her? And I said, I have a little institute down at Berkeley. We don't have much money, but we're going to give Julie a job. And GARE was born. First two groups, Seattle and Portland, were the first members. Now there are 450 members across the country. They have a staff of 25 people. They are pushing equity throughout the entire country. It went from 2 to 450 in 4 years. So why am I telling you all that? Well, Seattle's part of it, Tacoma's part of it, Portland's part of it. We got to move now from equity to belonging. And Washington's going to lead the way, right behind Dr. J. And in 4 or 5 years, we're going to be back here together talking about there are now 30, 40 states that are belonging states that are saying to everyone, everyone belongs. But it's not just saying it. When you look at contracting, when you look at schools, when you look at healthcare, when you look at housing, it's going to be reflected. So I'm going to end by just saying a couple of things. So belonging is actually a radical idea and a simple idea. It says everybody, but everybody belongs. It says it doesn't matter if you're able or called disabled. It doesn't matter if you're gay, straight, or trans. It doesn't matter if your first language is something other than English. You belong. But I want to extend it even further because we work, many of us, in the racial justice field. And we acknowledge that because of our history, we need to make special effort to include people who have historically and structurally and institutionally been excluded. It's not simply that somebody don't like them. Most of you are younger than me, so you may not know there's a singer named Oscar Brown Jr. And he has a song called 40 Acres and a Mule. So if you have a chance, listen to this song. Because in this song, he says, there's a guy, he says, can I take you to lunch? And Oscar Brown Jr. says, no thanks. Just give me my 40 acres and a mule. I take my own self to lunch. How about my own swimming pool? Just answer me quietly. When do I get, excuse my French, my goddamn 40 acres and my mule? What he is saying is that the work has to have some substance behind it. And it's not simply does someone like you or not. That's not unimportant. We need to love each other. But we also need to make sure the structures and institutions and zoning and procurement all reflect those things. We tried to say that a number of years ago when I helped to create something called critical race theory. What critical race theory says, it says many things, but one of the things it says is that racism is not mainly about animus between individuals. It's about structures. It's about systems. Today, people are like, those critical race theory people, they hate white people. No, critical race theory says it's not about just what people who are so-called white think. It's about structures and systems. That's what Oscar Brown Jr. was talking about. So we got to fix the structures and systems as well. And that's the work that you got to do. And you have to do it for everybody, including the groups that have been deeply marginalized and overlooked. But in doing so, don't forget white people. And this is a hard one for racial justice advocates. Because too often we assume that every white person is rich. Every white person is powerful. Every white person has a private jet. Okay, so we just had an election. And one of the interpretations of the election is that we did much better. And I know this is not political, but I am. So the Democrats did better. And the Trump deniers, the Steve Bannon white supremacists, didn't do as well as they thought they would. Why not? Because in part, we went out to rural white America and talk to those white people who don't have a pot to piss in and a window to throw it out of. We talked to poor whites, and we found out they're suffering too. And I'll end just by telling you this story. I was asked to go to rural Arkansas to talk to poor whites about the Affordable Care Act, about trying to actually get a Medicare waiver to create something that addresses their needs. And my host, as I was going to go on stage, said, Professor Powell, we had someone out here a month ago talking about the Affordable Care Act. They call it Obamacare. I think, we don't call Social Security Roosevelt Security. It's the Affordable Care Act. It's not Obamacare. So I went out there, and he said, somebody had us went out here a month ago, and they got booed off the stage. Good luck. And I'm 6 of 9 children. My family was sharecroppers. We got to do something hard, and somebody said, good luck. My mother and father would say, you go do it. This is not about luck. You make it happen. So I didn't believe in good luck. So I went on stage, and there were about 500 or 600 Trump supporters, all white, sitting in the audience. Everybody had everything they had crossed, their arms, their legs, their feet, their mouth. And I lied. I said, it's good to be here. And they were looking at me like, what is he doing here? And I said, before I start, I want to do something. I want to ask you a few questions, and if the answer is yes, I want you to stand up and stay standing. So how many of you have lost insurance because of a pre-existing condition? Stand up. Some people stood up. How many of you have had a prescription for your child or your husband or wife denied because the insurance company disregarded what your doctor said and wouldn't let you get your prescription filled? Stand up. How many of you lost your insurance because you lost your job? Stand up. I asked about 2 or 3 more questions. Now everybody's standing up. Nobody's arm is folded. I said, let's talk about that. How does that feel? To be disrespected, to be invisible, to not count as fully human. Tell me about that. And people are just cussing and yelling. Nobody's arms are folded now. Everybody's animated. And I said, this is what the Affordable Care Act is designed to fix. And there was silence. Somebody said, I thought it was designed to kill my grandmother. That's what we've been reading about. I said, no, it's not true. Look at the act itself. And I said, as bad as we have it here in rural Arkansas, they have it worse on the south side of Chicago among the Black community. They have it as bad in East LA in the Latino community. I didn't lose one person because I acknowledged their suffering. And then they could actually hear about other people's suffering. So part of the work of belonging Dr. G already introduced us to one African word. I'm going to introduce you to another one called Sawabanu, which means I see you. Another interpretation is the God in me sees the God in you. I see your family. I see your history. I see you. What we do when we say people don't belong, what we do with racism is we say, we don't see you. So Ralph Ellison wrote Invisible Man. So we have to see each other. All of us have to see each other. Whites, blacks, disabled, everybody has to see each other. So that's what belonging is about. It's seeing us, seeing the divine in us, seeing our human dignity, seeing our suffering, seeing our aspirations, and realize we're all in this together. And not doing it for someone else. As Dr. J said, not as an ally, but recognizing this is our party, and we're gonna have some fun, but we're gonna do it together. So I'm proud to be here with you, with Dr. J, with the governor, and I'm proud to be on this journey of turning Washington into the first belonging state in these United States. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Paul. So we're going to take questions. So I can run the mic around. Do we have any other mics out there? If not, I'll run. All right, we can take questions. Let me know what questions you have, and I'll come to you. Right here.
Good morning. I love your conversation about belonging. We should get there. My question is, I feel like equity is the work and belonging is the vision. And so I want to hear a little bit more about how we move from equity to belonging, or is equity a part of what we need to do to become belonging? The inclusion to belonging makes sense. Totally get that. So I just want to get a little deeper understanding that, please.
Thank you for the question. So for those in the back, the question is how, relationship to equity and belonging, how do we use equity to get to belonging? So it's a complicated question because of the way we practice equity. So just, some of you may know that I was one of 3 or 4 people in the 90s that introduced into the public discourse the concept of equity. So you go back to the 1980s, there's no talk about equity. If you talk about it, you're at a bank trying to get a loan. When we introduce equity and we move from equality, because at the time in the 1980s, people were talking about equality means treat everybody the same. And again, Dr. J and I were talking last night, that's not what equality means. In the West, the concept of equality comes from Aristotle. He understood that people who are situated differently should be treated differently. In the United States, when they embraced the concept of equality, they forgot that. And they just said, treat everybody the same. So we tried to move away from that narrow concept, what's called formal equality, to equity. And say equity is based on how people are situated. So people who are situated differently need different interventions, not because of the melanin in their skin, because of their situatedness. Seems very simple, still very controversial. But as it rolled out, what we started focusing on was what's called disparities between what's considered the favored group and the less favored group. And so the assumption was you have to actually either take from the favored group and give to the less favored group. It created what my friend Heather McGee talked about as a zero-sum game. One group wins and the other group loses, without looking at how the groups are situated. And the assumption in the racial justice context is that white people are the favored group. And we have to take from white people to give to people of color. And that goes over like a lead balloon. you actually create tension, what we call breaking between groups, because everyone thinks that it's not enough, and only somebody's going to win, and everybody else is going to lose. And so a lot of the equity work in practice has actually created tensions between groups, not just between whites and people of color. Just look at what happened out in LA a few weeks ago, between Blacks and Latinos, between Blacks and Native Americans. Each group tries to situate itself as the worst off and ignore all the other groups. That's the way we practice equity. It's a failed strategy. It doesn't work. So we came along and we introduced something called target universalism. And the idea is that you have universal goals. The universal goal is not dependent on what some other group has. So what does all groups need to fully thrive and participate? That's the universal goal. But you don't then conflate and put all groups in the same. You say, when we look at this universal goal, we notice that groups are distributed unevenly. The groups are situated unevenly. So what you need to do for the Black community may be different than what you need to do for the Native community. May be different again than what you need to do for the white community. But your goal is not just to get the Black community to that universal goal. Your goal is to get every group to that universal goal. What happens in most cases is that whites are a little bit away from that universal, Blacks are further away, and Native Americans are further away still. And a lot of that's because of our situatedness, because of our zip code, because of our history. The situatedness does the work. So that's how we actually talk about equity in terms of targeted universalism to promote belonging. And targeted universalism, and I know I'm rushing over some things, is about getting everybody to that universal, every group. It allows us to hear the suffering of every group, even though the suffering may be different. Say, I have time for one more question. So they said it's time for one more question. So I know there's somebody in the back there who's trying to ask.
I have a question. You can hear me?
Yes.
Okay. So one of the things, I work in a very small agency and it's become quite diverse over time, and we spend a lot of time thinking about equity and belonging. And one of the things in the back of my mind that I'm always considering, both as a leader and a woman of color, is what belonging looks like for one group could be contextually different for another. And so as we've tried to grapple with that, like we have goals and expectations about our organizational belonging, but then we're also doing this sustained work of like, and what does that mean when I'm in a meeting as a brown woman with a doctorate in a meeting with my legislative and policy liaison who's from a different place with different experiences? Can we both belong together in that space? And I think we can. We're working on that. So I just am sharing that one of the things that we have to grapple with when it comes to belonging is how that is separate from niceness and kindness. So I think sometimes we show that there is belonging, but the people who should feel that belonging are not actually receiving it. So one of the things that I would love to hear from you is like, what have you done to grapple with the complexity of belonging, both in affinity spaces and in spaces where people from various backgrounds are coming together? And then I would also like to invite you to come to our session to hear about like what our teeny little agency is trying to do to like make this come to life.
So these questions are profound, and I know we have limited time. This is something that many of us have been grappling with most of our lives. We have to be careful. First of all, We are co-creating the future. We are co-creating the future. There's sometimes a tendency to actually only focus on the past. The past is important, but so is the future. There's a limited of what we can do in terms of changing the past, but there's a lot we can do in terms of changing the future. We're not just making new policies, we're making new people. And we're doing it together. Again, it's not your party, it's not my party, it's our party. Whose earth is it? Yes, we're situated differently, and we should talk about that. But part of that is also to change that situation. To change the situation. Now, when COVID happened, people were all confused. Governor of New York, a Democrat, said, this is an equal opportunity virus. And I said, it's going to be the first virus that ever existed, because no virus in the history of humankind has ever been equal opportunity. It's always filtered through structures. We were the first group who pushed the first state to have disaggregated data so we could see how COVID was affecting different groups. And a lot of people, good-intentioned people, were shocked. I mean, Black people are dying at a higher level? What's up with that? And the Surgeon General, who's Black himself at the time, said, well, it's because Black people don't know how to behave. Smoke too much, drink too much, don't get enough exercise. So he blamed it all on Black people. And I said, no, that can't be right. How did he get to be Surgeon General? And then people started looking at conditions. Stay 6 feet apart. If you live as a farm worker in barracks, there's no way you're going to stay 6 feet apart. They say wash your hands several times a day. If you're Native American and you don't have access to water, how are you going to wash your hands? So the conditions matter. And sometimes we confuse the conditions with the people. So yes, we can all belong. In fact, the only way we can belong is we all belong. The only way we can belong is that we all belong. And it doesn't mean ignoring your condition. Your conditions are changing, but it doesn't mean ignoring other people's conditions either. You can hear each other's suffering. To suffer together means compassion. So I don't have to be a woman to support choice, abortion rights. I don't have to be in a wheelchair to support having an elevator. I don't have to be a Muslim to be opposed to the Muslim ban in the United States. And I still have my own history. I'm still an aging old Black man with a limp. Now, anyone else in that group, stand up. Okay, don't stand up, because we got a limp too. The point is, we can care about each other without losing ourselves. We have that capacity, and belonging invites us into that. And so, yes, it doesn't mean you like each other, it doesn't mean you're gonna hang out with each other, but it does mean you recognize each other's humanity. Now, I'll end just like this. Some people say, that all sounds good, John, but where have you seen that happen? Everywhere. Most countries who are called democracies no longer have the death penalty. Why not? They came to that by recognizing that, okay, this person did something heinous. They killed someone, they raped someone, they burned down somebody's house. Should we kill them? They came to that because of Salabano. They came to that because most countries went through a process of saying, even when someone does something terrible and we have to lock them up, they still are human. They still belong in some way. So in Canada, a few miles up the road, if you do something heinous, if you kill someone, if you rape someone, if you blow up something, you go to jail. But you know what? While you're in jail, first you go to jail, you don't go to the death penalty, you don't go to electric chair, you go to jail. While you're in jail, you still have the right to vote. While you're in jail in Canada, you still get public services. While you're in jail, you still get health care. In the United States, if you smoke a joint and you're black, you go to jail and you get out, you still don't have the right to vote. You still can't go into public housing. You still can't, because in Canada, they say, yes, you did something, but you still belong. You're still part of the political community. In the United States, they say, even if you didn't do anything, if you're wrong color, if you're wrong religion, if you love people differently, they say you don't belong. So we have to, so it's real. There's expressions of it all around the world. And I'll end just by saying this. Canada, Dr. Jay and I had a conversation with him. The Secretary General, which is the head of Canada, created Canada as a belonging nation 15 years ago. And it has some substantive policies behind it. And Canada is deliberately a multicultural country. So it's not saying we all blend together, but it's saying we all belong together. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Paul. You know, I'm hardly ever enamored by celebrities, but I think I'm a celebrity myself. So anyway, but I am enamored by wisdom. And so, can I give you a hug? And then on behalf of the Office of the Governor and the Office of Equity, we'd like to present you with a certificate. Thank you so much.
Your name is on this, and the governor's name is on this. What did he say? He said the only way we all belong is that we all belong. Is that what you said? The only way that we all belong is that we all belong. John Paul, you belong here. And it's everybody, by the way, not everybody, everybody belongs here. Thank you, my friend. It's break time. We might be a little early. That's okay. You've been sitting here a long time. Are you glad you came this morning? All of our volunteers, would you please stand? We have a host of volunteers, largely from the Department of Social and Health Services and others, who, if you're in the room, just stand quickly. Let's just say that they must be out volunteering because I don't see them in the room. So if you see someone with an Office of Equity lanyard, give them a hug or shake their hand. Thank you. Please take some time to refresh yourself, revive, and relieve yourself during break. The first session begins at 10:30, Charlene?
Yes.
10:30. And during break, though, just if you want to sit in the room and soak in, think about what you just heard, jot down some of your key takeaways from what John Paul said, some of the things you heard, what are you going to do with what you heard? Just be at peace, be you, do you, and be in your room by 10:30, please. Thank you for coming. Look forward to seeing you this afternoon.
It's Julia.
I'm going to stop this.
I think that's important.